Hello, everyone. This is Cosmic Casual Chat, and I'm Brian Germain, and I'm bringing to you a fascinating guest. This might be a little outside of your box. However, I think it's nice to, kind of loosen up our, kind of definition of what is weird, because the real world is weirder than you thought. And so what I've been doing for a long time is bringing people down into a very deep state of meditation that some could call hypnosis. And that is a pretty revealing experience. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you,
thrilled you're.
Brian. I do appreciate you taking time out talking to me
Oh,
today.
of course. Yeah, this is great. I want to share you, with my community, with my channel. Um, so how did you get wrapped up with deep hypnosis stuff?
Oh boy. The short answer to that, because I could talk about it till, a week from Sunday, is that I just wanted to heal myself. I had a pain condition um, that I dealt with for many years that doctors couldn't help me. And I mean, nobody could help me. I thought when I finally got like to a pain clinic, I thought, well, pain clinic, that should be able to help me. That was the worst one of all. And so I kind of gave up on doctors. And then I discovered just this idea of self-healing and Reiki, right? And this is long ago, year 2000 or so. And Reiki was great because I learned that maybe I could do something for myself instead of counting on somebody else to do something so that I would feel better. So this whole idea of helping my own self was the first step. But I've always been interested and I've always had some strange things happen to me throughout my life. So I've been very open-minded in that way. But it wasn't until 2008 when I had kind of a dark night of the soul with the pain condition. I had a huge project, a giant photo shoot. I was doing a lot of professional photography at the time. And the night before a shoot that took me 8 months to set up for an album cover for a country and western singer down in Texas, I couldn't get out of bed because of this pain condition. And I really felt like a loser canceling the whole thing and all of the components and everything else. And I sort of prayed hard. I've always prayed, but I prayed myself into kind of a stupor almost. I had a spontaneous out of body experience. My out of body experience, I just, it seemed like a dream, but it wasn't a dream. Um, I had these humanoid shaped light beings standing in front of me. And um, this part's probably important though. My prayer, my whole life, and my whole life of pain, which was considerable, was someone please help me. Someone help me. God, Jesus, Mary, saints, spirit guides, don't care.
Yeah,
God,
exactly. I don't care where it comes from. Just send me a rope. Yeah.
but something about that day after that photo shoot cancellation, I changed my prayer to what am I supposed to do? And it seems like not a big difference, but it was huge because I believe that's what instigated my profound spiritual experience of standing in front of these light beings. And the one in the middle stood up, literally stood up and handed me, which seemed like a piece of copy paper. On the copy paper, it had a list of things to do.
No.
One,
Okay.
two, three,
That's
right?
very direct.
Directly answering my question.
Wow.
And the whole next day after this experience was really as profound as that first experience was. The whole next day was even more profound because the entire day laid out like with a red carpet. Like I'm looking around thinking there must be cameras on me, all of the doors that open and all of the things that line up to address that list of things to do. Number three on the list was have a past life regression. I'd heard of them before, didn't know much about them. And the day, so again, I had that profound experience. And the next day, I'm working on the list. And one of the things I did was go to the mailbox, and somebody had mailed me a book by a name by a woman named Dolores Cannon. I'd never heard of her before. But
Mm.
by the end of that day, I had signed up to go to Arkansas to take her class on past life regression. And then several weeks later, I was on my way there, and I was just in my head, the same sort of experience of these beings in front of me began talking. Spirit began talking to me, and I heard that she's going to choose you to be the demonstration subject.
Mhm.
And, I knew there was going to be 25-ish kind of people, at least at this class. I knew that almost everybody was going to and hoping that they would be chosen because Dolores herself, Dolores Cannon, very famous past life regressionist, had even at the time, I think, a year-long waiting list. And and the whole time there, I'm hearing this voice, and I was very really humble at the time. I'm like, why am I hearing this? Everybody's going to want this. Why me? And it took 9 hours to drive from Austin up to Fayetteville, Arkansas. And by the time I got there, I'd asked the question so many times, and Spirit just kind of came back. It doesn't because you're destined for this. And I knew that she would choose. And so when we got to the classroom, and she said, and it was a notebook kind of like this, she was like, put your name right here if you are interested in volunteering. And the whole class, except for two people, only two people didn't put their name on the list. But I was one of those two people. I did not put my name on the list
Oh, interesting.
because, I mean, part of me thought I was testing God in a way.
Mm.
But Spirit said, it doesn't matter if your name's on the list or not. That doesn't matter. You will be chosen. And I'm like, I mean, I'm telling you, it was turmoil in my head. It was turmoil because there was another small part of me that's like, well, if you're really supposed to have past life regression, you should put your name on the list.
Yep.
But I didn't put my name on the list. And when it came time for her to choose, she stood up and she walked down through the classroom. She stood right next to my desk and said that um, they told her to choose me, even though I didn't put my name on the list. So would I consider volunteering anyway? And at that moment, my life just,
At this point, you've had what most sort of normal-minded people would think of as a dream state, maybe a prophetic vision or something like that a little bit. But how do you frame it? You know what I mean? It's in terms of integrating our sane perspective and not feeling like we're going out of our minds.
yeah.
Um, so was that at this point, I mean, did you feel like you were all in terms of believing that what you experienced was a valid non-physical experience, or was there a part of you that wondered, is this just basically a dream, a manufacturing of my imagination?
No, because the day after the thing happened, the other two things on the list, the things that happened were so unbelievable. I want to do a movie about it. It's so
Sure.
unbelievable what happened the next day
Yeah.
because of all the different synchronicities that couldn't have been set up by anybody for any reason to work out that way. And it just was, I had to believe it. There
Yeah.
was no not believing it. And it was profound. And yeah, it just changed my life. And then um, so she did the session. And then not long after that, I knew that I wanted to do this work because of everything that had happened. But the first thing that happened was it didn't happen right away. It wasn't instantaneous, but my pain condition faded away. I no longer had it. It wasn't boom overnight. A lot of times the healings are, but for me, it took 3 to 4 months, maybe even up to 5 months. But as I started walking down this path of what I really understood was I wasn't fulfilling the contract and the goal of my life. I, I now fully understand that as souls, we decide, we choose, we take on this very difficult life on physical earth to to do something. Usually, it expands our souls, but usually we have like a goal. We have an outline, we have a reason for being here, contracts with other people, or a purpose for our soul. And I wasn't fulfilling my soul's purpose. my soul's purpose, it was a lot of things, but one of the other things that I was told to do on the list was to take my photography skills. I hung up my professional hat. I no longer do professional photography, but I started even back then. So that's 2008, and I do it. I did it just last week too. I take my camera into hospitals, and I provide a volunteer service, a gift to. I meet with mothers who lose babies at birth or shortly thereafter. I do remembrance portrait photography,
Oh, that's so sweet.
and it's it's so fulfilling. I use my photography gifts in other ways, but I still use my camera, but in that way. So I assist people in that way. I help people that way. I help people with my quantum healing work. And then what I really realized and what really changed was after Dolores died and some of the things that happened just after she died, and then of course what happened in 2020. So much of the time span, she died in 2014 and then up to 2020. That period of time was tumultuous for me personally, of course, for the world as 2020 started. And I realized that one of the things I was doing was helping to bring quantum healing to the world in another way that wasn't available before 2020, and it's so needed right now.
Oh, from my perspective, I mean, I've learned, quite a lot, studying this stuff, but I'm not convinced that everybody understands what quantum healing is. So maybe we
Right.
can
Thank you
put a
for
little,
bringing us back to the steps. So the whole idea, it really stems from, we had to change the name. Why do we have to change the name? Well, this idea of going and thinking about or learning about a past life, first of all, a lot of people have the question, what if I don't believe in past lives? Well, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter if you open up and sort of allow your imagination to consider that. Sometimes just considering it brings the healing,
yeah.
right? My past life with Dolores Cannon, I was a caveman, and yeah, and anyway, I was a rebel caveman who wanted to do things in a different way, right? And the bully caveman and all the other cave people kicked me out of the caveman group, and then they forced me off a ledge. They killed me because I was an independent thinker. I wanted to try new things. I wanted community. I wanted to do things easier. I wanted to try new tools. And in a way, my life right now as a healer was the same way. It was like, how about we try a few new things with healing? So even though I was in the alternative healing community, I opened it up even more.
Yeah.
The idea really is we're energy. No matter what, no matter how
Mhm.
you're looking at it, we're energy. And how you interact with the world, your beliefs, and all of that are integral to your health. So not everything, you have to step out of the materialistic view a little bit
Yep.
to understand how energy healing or how hypnosis works. Most people understand placebo, most people understand psychosomatic kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It is in that realm. Your mind is
Sure.
very, very powerful, and it can help you make you sick or it can help heal you. And and there you go. So quantum healing, we changed the name because this isn't all about past lives. It's about so many more things than that.
Yeah, and the way I continue to look at it is whether or not somebody believes in past lives, which from a certain perspective, it's not really past anyway, because from that,
Right,
in that realm, it's all now. So whether they believe it or not to me is irrelevant
right. It
because
doesn't
if you
matter.
think of it as a symbolic,
Exactly.
archetypal story that you're telling yourself in a different way, okay, in your dream, you were Ringo Starr in Caveman. Right. You were the game changer that steps up and does something else. Well, aren't you doing that in your life as that is a metaphor? And that I think can inform people about the patterns that can be repeated if you stay in the same mindset or evolved and expanded if you put more thought into it. Um,
It's really, really fascinating. And, just like human beings, you might know this in romantic relationships, people kind of repeat. They
we-
repeat patterns, right? They have the same kind of boyfriend or or spouse or partner over and over again because they're working something out. Well, in this idea of past lives, whether or not they're symbolic or whether they're actual, we tend to repeat patterns, right? So sometimes one of the things you do is in experiencing the storyline in that way is you understand how that storyline, if it's a pattern, it informs what's going on in your life right now, or it can. And so many things I have seen have instantaneously changed right before my eyes. Here's an example. I had a woman who had terrible scoliosis.
Mm.
And long story short, she had a very interesting experience in her session. And one of them was she was in the Irish potato famine back in the, I guess it was 1700s. I'm not great with remembering exact dates, but somewhere around in there where it was just terrible famine. And she was with her mother and she was bending over and she was digging in a plot for potatoes, even though she knew there was nothing in there. She'd been in that plot over and over again. They'd scoured it. There's nothing else left in there, but she was hungry. She and her mother were starving. She didn't know what else to do. They were ready to kick her out of this rented piece of land where they had been growing potatoes. So in these sessions, we have an experience, and then we talk to. Remember that. We'll go back to the first part of the interview. The light beings that
Mm-hmm.
handed me information. Most of us tend to think of that as our light counsel or our higher selves or our soul self. These labels can get it kind of doesn't matter. A higher perspective, right? And so in these sessions, often we have a story, and then often we ask the higher self or the light counsel, well, why'd you show them that? What was important about this? And so this woman who'd come to see me, terrible pain, scoliosis, and I had another scoliosis person just last week, as a matter of fact. Um, the higher self said, "Well, you were bending to the will of the Catholic Church because it
Oh,
was the
okay.
Catholic Church that was kicking this family, this Irish family, out of this plot for to enrich their lands because they too were suffering because of the famine and all of this. And so she was bending to the will. So the higher self said, I showed her that because she's carrying that story in her DNA, and she's carrying it in her spine, and she's carrying it in her maternal line. Right. And not only is that woman, this is a past life, that was your great great grandmother.
Well,
This was your great great grandmother's story. This is the story of that. And there was more to learn about that. But when she sat up out of the session, she actually yes, she
well.
actually sat up straighter and said she didn't have pain. And this was a person who was older than me at the time,
Hmm.
in late 60s, early 70s.
Hmm.
It was amazing. So sometimes it happens
Incredible.
that fast
Yep.
that and we're told that's not possible.
Right.
That's
Right.
not possible. But I've had so many. I collect those stories of
Oh, I bet
spontaneous
you have.
remissions.
Yeah, I bet you have a lot.
A lot of them. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
how fun is that? I mean, it's
Yeah,
just a massive sea of wisdom that you can pull from to make sense of all of this.
yeah.
That's
And in the shortest period of time, too. We're not talking months or years long therapy. It's like, why not give it a try for an afternoon? See what you learn about yourself.
right. And figure out the derivation of the lessons that you're learning. I think is the most important thing
Yeah,
is to figure out what are these compelling energies, these concept forms that are non-physical, right? I mean, if you're not in that lifetime as a potato farmer, it's not terribly relevant, but the symbology of it is still here right now.
it is. But
The
I think,
farmer.
even though we continue to say it doesn't matter if it's symbolic or real, I'm one of the people who believe that we've only mapped part of the human genome.
Yep.
And I believe that, and you may have heard of this concept of junk DNA,
Hmm.
right? There's DNA that they can study and look at, and then there's all this stuff they don't know what to do with. Well, I've
Hmm.
been told over and over again in sessions, that's some of these storylines. So that storyline of this woman was in this woman's DNA. It was woven into her DNA, which is like every cell in her body was carrying this story.
Hmm.
And yeah, so it helped unravel that, right? So and I believe that more of our DNA is opening up and coming online, and we have access to more of this greater understanding of ourselves.
Right. And I think that if somebody was to look at DNA just as the mechanism of the body, building the proteins and whatever, this stuff sounds a little nutty. But if you're to go, wait a minute, but how does a sparrow know how to fly? How does a bird know how to run? They have built into them knowledge,
Yeah,
information, and tendencies. Flying south for the winter and everything else. How does the salmon know to go upstream at this time of year?
yeah.
It's not only behavioral teaching, clearly.
Mhm.
And so if
No.
there's this unconscious instinctual pull for an animal, for something as complex as our mind, what else can be brought forth, brought
So
forward into the
much.
here and now moment that needs to be healed, that needs
Yep.
to be, or possibly, wisdom resurrected. Do you find that also, in terms, there's the dark night of the soul stuff and the energy work that people do to let go of the bricks in the hot air balloon so it can rise. That's the way I metaphorically think of it. But what of the profound wisdom from recognizing the multidimensional nature of the soul?
So much is involved in that because so much is explained by that. Much of what we deem as suffering or terrible circumstance gets a perspective that somehow gives us understanding of why some of these bigger things happen, and we understand. So if you've ever heard the term multidimensional, we're multidimensional beings, and that seems sort of like, what does that even mean?
Mm.
But what that really means is, we have a life force that isn't just contained within this physical form. There's so much more of us. We are very much focused when we're awake and conscious and in this realm, but we have portions of us that feel, exist, and learn and participate with reality in other. If you kind of think of yourself as a radio, you're on this station right now being physical, but it's just a station, right? And you can change the station, right? That doesn't just on that same radio. You can change the station, you can change the focus, and some of the people, one way of looking at all of this, which is a really fascinating concept, is some of the people who are schizophrenic, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It can be terrible, frightening for families as well as the people experiencing it. But we have this people who exist more normally, shall we say, or in this world,
For lack of
who
a
don't
better
have
word.
who don't have these issues. We can keep our radio on one station at a time, even sometimes, right? You've ever heard that, two radio stations at the same time? Maybe that's when you're hearing something or experiencing something or having a paranormal event. Well, some people with schizophrenia, they're going up and down that dial, and they're saying this happening to me here, this is happening to me there, and it makes no sense to the people around them because they're just going up and down the dial like that, right? But if you think about the fact that we are multidimensional, um, that makes sense there too, right? They're just going up and down the dial and they're seeing too many things and their focus isn't on one thing and it doesn't participate in our reality. But doing these sessions, going into a dreamlike state in hypnosis or just relaxation is another way of putting it.
Mhm.
Um, for example, you can make contact with other realms or other portions of where your energy is existing, is one way of looking at it, to access them to bring back skills to help you in this realm. And one of the ways I see that happen most is when other healers come for sessions.
Hmm.
tend to have these sessions and understand um, where they've come from and why they're doing this. Here's a great story for you. This one happened in early days. I'd only been practicing QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique by Dolores Cannon, for a few years when I had this woman come to me and she said, I'm a healer. I am a healer. I help people heal. I use crystals. She was older than me. She was beautiful. She had a very raspy voice. And I got her story. And she said, I'm here because I help people heal. I'm good at it. I believe in this. I need healing myself. She lived in Houston of all places to have such an issue, but it was with her lungs, right? She had been born at a time when NICUs weren't even invented yet. She was born, she was the size of a pound of butter. She was like, and she was stuck in a shoebox. Nobody thought this child would live. They put the baby in a shoebox. They attended to her mother, who was in terrible shape, who ended up living. And then when her mother had, gone through her trauma enough that somebody decided to look in the shoebox, this little tiny baby that shouldn't have been alive was alive. She was probably just 27 weeks ish. And this was back in the 40s, 50s, right? So they did what they could do. But one of the last things to develop in a baby is the lungs. And so she never could breathe
Mhm.
properly. She had very malformed lungs. She had asthma. She had trouble breathing. So she basically had a birth defect. Okay. So she's like, I would like to be able to breathe, and I know I was born that way and all this. And so we do this session. And in her past life, she goes back to ancient times, Atlantean times, where she is, believe it or not, a crystal healer, right? So she's, this makes so much sense. She's already doing this in this life now, but she learns a depth there and she embodies who she is there, some skill levels. Basically, she meets another version of herself there, right? So they meet, they combine, and when she comes up out of her session, it's still to this day, one of the most dramatic sessions I ever had. She jumped up out of bed. I mean, jumped up out of bed like a pogo stick. And she started jumping around the room, taking these big gulps of air. I thought she
Wow.
was going to hyperventilate. She was going, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. She goes, I can breathe. I can breathe. I can breathe. Her voice was different. She was taking these big, and I'm like, oh my God, you're going to fall over. She was jumping, 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 jumping. And then at one point, she grabbed her knees. And she said, my knees don't hurt. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at her and I'm just sitting there like this, right? And I said, your knees? She said, yeah, my knees don't hurt. I have terrible arthritis in my knees. I'm like, you never told me about your knees. She said, well, who cares about knees when you can't breathe? I mean, she
Mhm.
came for the session all about she needed to breathe and it was getting
Yeah.
worse. But she left that day a person who could breathe deeply. She was like 65 years old. This was a birth defect, a
Yeah.
birth defect. And I mean, I'm looking at the door after she leaves going, if this work can help someone with a birth defect, what can't it do? And the answer is, I don't know yet because I
Yeah.
haven't found it.
Maybe there's no limit. Yeah. It
There's no.
it's it makes me also wonder. So when we talk about psychosomatics, you brought that up, right? So I've always felt like whether it was a psychosomatic healing or one that they gave you a pill and then you believed, and so you inhabited that new reality of where
Yeah.
you are
Why
healed
not? What's the
because
difference?
you put your face exactly.
What's the
Who
difference?
cares? The
Who
pain
cares?
doesn't hurt,
Right.
right?
As long as you're feeling better, what does it really matter?
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, if you want to think about it, because I asked about this a lot, because when I sat up for my session with Dolores, because of the hype and everything, I'm like, but I'm still in pain. And I had so many questions. I'm like, why am I still in pain? Well, it took a while for me to understand this, but even though I was very open-minded, my belief system was still quite conventional.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure somebody could be healed like that. My belief system modified my healing. I was
Hmm.
told completely after that, Well, you basically your higher self decided to put you on a path of gradual healing so that you could accept it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, what's going on with your family will, because like if you have an instantaneous healing and you
Hmm.
go home and tell your family you have an instantaneous healing, and your family's like, but that's not possible,
Yeah.
and you're making that up and you're kidding yourself and you're deluding yourself, you can
Yep. You can believe them a little bit.
possibly
Yeah.
and if you might just take away your instantaneous healing
Sure.
because of the energy is a mismatch there.
Hmm.
And if you put yourself in a situation where the energy is completely mismatched, it can undo something as
I
beautiful as a healing like that.
Yeah, there was a master healer that lived about 2000 years ago that would say, this is between you and me, basically. I'm helping you remember that you are healed. Don't
Yeah.
tell anybody,
A
right?
little bit.
A little
Sometimes
bit
a
of
little
that,
bit
a
like,
little bit of like, this is between you and you, right?
yeah.
In terms of
It's
you
yeah.
allowing it to be your reality.
You're making me think about this though. I had an emergency room doctor come see me once, and it was somebody who literally I had an in-town office at the time, just my tiny little town. I don't anymore, but my tiny little sleepy town outside of Wichita office. And the doctor said, I have a um, torn ACL. I'm coming to see you, but do you have a back door? Literally would not come in the front door of my
Yep.
office. This emergency room doctor came in, had the most spectacular session, stood up after the session was now look, it doesn't happen every time, but it does happen. These instantaneous healings, they're not guaranteed. I say that to everybody, but it does happen. And that doctor stood up and walked around the room and then was feeling it and everything and was like, my God, I'm healed, and was just walking around. And I sat down and I was talking to the doctor, and look at me. I can't imagine that they'd be watching this, but I'm not even like giving anything away about
No
any of the
names.
details, but anything, even the gender or anything. And I said, well, are you going to tell your colleagues about this?
Hmm.
And the doctor said, not only am I not telling my colleagues, I'm not telling my spouse. I'm telling nobody.
I think that
And
frees you up,
it's
doesn't it?
it, well, but it also made me sad. Here's a healer
Right.
who's in the profession of helping people heal, who just had a wonderful healing with no knives, no drugs, just the power of the human body self-healing with some right kind of energy and support during doing that, and is so programmed by society and the conventional thinking, and
Yep.
that they would not share it with
I
anyone.
think that's got to be the hardest part about, when we think about a quantum jump, we're living in two different realms. There's this 3D reality where science is science, where matter is hard and it takes time to heal and all this stuff. And then you have this experience that proves that it's more than that in the sane mind comes in and says, yeah, but it wants to slow down that process, and you go back to limping, so to speak, in terms of the 3D perspective that is limited.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, this doctor had to pretend to limp for a little while, right? To keep the story going.
Yeah.
I mean, how nutty is
Well,
that, right?
that's the
So
world.
some of your audience may be listening if they haven't already clicked off because it doesn't match their reality
That's fine.
stream. But some of you might, well, what about the proof? Well, I've actually been involved in some of the provings, right? And what's really fascinating about that is, and now what I'm talking about, like, are MRIs
I
or
was going to ask.
X-rays
So the
or
functional
blood
MRI,
tests and stuff. Oh yeah, all
yeah,
of those kinds of
fMRI,
things.
PET
So the
scans, yeah,
yeah, all of that. So the scale is all the way from the healing manifests, but nothing changes on any of the tests, which is a mismatch,
Hmm.
to some of it's changed, and then some of these test results are completely normal again.
Hmm.
So it's not always the same, and it's not always provable by tests. And the ones where the tests are normal, and some of my favorite ones of that are bulging discs that are no longer bulging. But
Sure.
it was really fascinating. I show this screen a lot. Even though the discs themselves were healed, the vertebrae next to them were more solid and younger looking bones, right? So if you look at these two, like they are not the same person except for they were. And the younger, nicer looking spine and discs were happened weeks after this one. And the story there, and this one's 13 years old, at least this story that I'm thinking of. The doctor, this can't be true. Redo the scans. We need to, somebody's mismatched something. They still come out that way. And the doctor like literally threw this woman out of his office. It was like, I don't know what's going on here. You need to leave. Don't come back.
What I'm seeing is la la
Like,
la la
I
la
don't
la,
have to,
right? La,
right?
la.
I don't have to anyway. But other doctors are better about it. They simply go, I can't explain this.
Right.
It's a miracle. See you later.
Yeah.
And at least you get that from some of them. It's better than the please don't ever talk to me again.
Because this
Doctors who get scared.
it breaks their world.
It
You know, the
does. It can.
worldview is
It
we're
can.
sort of tenaciously hanging on to our understanding, and even that within, the 3D science mindset of Newtonian
Yeah.
physics and whatnot. It's still a little tenuous because we don't understand all of it. And then you bring in this whole other set of possibilities,
Yeah.
and people feel crazy, which makes them scared. And then what do? We retreat back into our old models and try to make
And
sense of it from that perspective.
it's exactly right. How we're raised and the things that were around for the longest time. It's huge. It
Yeah.
really is huge. And your entire sense of identity, but even more than that, your entire sense of how the world operates.
Yep.
People don't like that being shook up very much, even for things that can be true. It wasn't it Mark Twain that said, you can fool the people easier than convince them that they were fooled.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep. Yep. I think it's extremely relevant.
yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible to observe so many, kind of clear evidence that something else is going on here. you know,
Yeah.
and
The
depending
medical
on
term usually is spontaneous remission. They
spontaneous
they will
remission.
they will
Yep.
sometimes say spontaneous remission and then just shrug their shoulders, and that's the best that they can go. I actually had I was working with Dolores when this happened. He went to one of her classes. Again, it was another Houston person for whatever reason. It was a young doctor from Houston who came to her class, and he was very young and he was very excited about all of the potential. And he worked with a big hospital down in Houston. And it was in his mind that he was going to create a, a group, a component, a kind of a way to introduce this within the system, to help the system, to help people. I mean, as he was so young, he was so wet behind the ears. I was too. We had a few meetings. It was all about how we can do this and what. And there, he was naive. I was naive. It was shut down. It was you're not going to do anything like this here. That nothing like that is going to happen in our hospital. We don't go down that road.
I find with making change, you got to push on the soft spots. If you're meeting with resistance, you're wasting your energy, and your time. So just move a little to the left or something, and you find where it's receptive. And given that, from what I've learned is that the human soul, the human mindset doesn't get to the point where it's open to change, to expand its model until it gets to that place of, oh, please help me. Like where you were, anybody, please help me. Give me
Yeah,
instructions
but
or
remember,
something.
I changed my question, which was
Yeah.
huge. what I did was instead of looking outside, I turned it back. What am I supposed to do differently?
Hmm.
And that to me, that's huge. That's a big part
That's
of
interesting.
all of it is
Yeah.
rather than being a victim,
Right.
rather than thinking something happened to you that doesn't make any sense, looking for how, even as inexplicable as it may seem, how and why. I mean, let's go back to those babies that I photographed. Um, what I've learned over and over and over again, you might have heard of, if you believe in this idea of the star seed, right?
Hmm.
The person who's having a life that is on Earth this time, but maybe most of their lives or other existences were on other planes or on other planets or in different kinds of reality, but have decided to try, what's it like to do that here? Well, there's some energies and living beings that have lives that are so different from this one, which is so dense and so physical,
Hmm.
that to come into a body that's this dense and this physical and this limited from where they came from, what we've learned is many of these babies who die in utero, even very young, they can't hold their energetics in a physical form. Uh,
Yeah.
it's like they're dipping a toe into being physical.
Hmm.
And for those of you out there, and I know, believe you me, I mean, I've been in hundreds of these rooms now, hospital rooms, who've lost a child or have had family members who've lost a child or a baby, especially in pregnancy. You might be interested in knowing that many of my clients who have that story and who ask about it, the subsequent babies, sometimes like the baby gets it the next time, like
Yeah.
learns from the first try, and the
Yeah.
same soul goes, well, didn't quite make that one work, and I'm going to try again.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so often you really haven't. If you think about it this way, or if you make room for the possibility,
Hmm.
you may think, I didn't lose a baby. I just had to try again for them to help manifest the correct physical form to be
Yeah.
able to come into life on the planet.
This is a
Isn't
very
that a
specific
beautiful,
thing.
isn't that a
It's great.
beautiful
I
way
love
of
that.
thinking about that?
Instead of, yeah, a failure and a loss,
And grieving, yeah, it's like,
yeah,
well, we tried.
you can see the infinite nature of the soul.
Yeah,
And it was
exactly.
just like when you get into an ice bath. I don't know if you've ever done any cryotherapy stuff. The first time I get in, I get back out. I can't take it. It's too much. It's too cold. And then I'll get back in. So I think maybe, for
Mhm.
for somebody coming from a completely different existence,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe that's normal.
I feel like I have um, still a pretty direct line with my teacher.
Yeah,
Um,
you do.
I think, well, thank you.
I mean,
I,
I've
I,
witnessed it.
I, so I really feel like she still has, even though she has moved into another realm, I don't think she has gone so far away from the planet that she stopped communicating with. And I'm not anyone special, meaning she communicates with a lot of people, even people she never knew. I have people call me all the time. You're not going to believe this, but I think I talked to Dolores. I usually laugh because almost all of them then will tell me their experience. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like her. And I think she's very open and very easy to communicate with. So even
Yep.
anybody who may be watching this, if you've read one of her books and you're like, I wish I could, well, just go pretend in your head and you'd be surprised what happens next. Anyway,
Well, yep.
she's here talking to us, but
Yep.
to reach back to this non-physical realm stuff. Do you know how you had been saying earlier, maybe people don't believe in this or don't believe in other realms or don't, they don't believe in this. Dolores at one point was talking to me, and I just found this absolutely fantastical, but so interesting and fascinating. There are way more, apparently, beings and life forms that are non-physical than are physical. So that's number one.
Sure.
And number two, there are many non-physical beings who think the idea of being able to have um, dense physical matter contain life,
Hmm.
they think that's a myth.
A myth.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're a myth to them,
that's hilarious.
isn't it?
That's really funny.
They're like, that's not possible.
Reminds me of that T-shirt of the alien face that says there's no such thing as humans.
It's the same thing. Yeah, same kind of thing. And he just
Fascinating.
was like, wow, you
I
know?
love I love that. I love that. Yeah, there's the thing that I am really curious also about. Dolores talked of there's, kind of the higher self,
Hmm.
right? So the multidimensional self, like Pamela says, like there's the head of the octopus and then all the legs and all these other
Hmm.
experiences you call lifetimes.
Hmm.
But it's all unified and there's information reporting back to inform and enlarge the understanding of the soul.
Yeah.
And then there's this unconscious that's sort of interconnecting all of these. Maybe you could think of them as neurons, each soul that's reaching out into the what if of the universe and the big push button surprise of the human experience. But something, a field, a quantum field, is connecting all of it.
Yeah.
And the part that I would like to ask you about is when you work with clients, especially if it's, sort of over time or somebody that really works well, in this environment, what have you experienced in terms of people connecting to that collective unconscious, that sea of wisdom that's infinite, the all that is mind?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
That's such a huge question. Well, there's so many answers to that I don't even know how to answer it. It's the most surprising stuff can come through, stuff that doesn't, sometimes it's hard to even translate some of it, right?
Mhm.
We end up tending to experience things that we can at least describe. There's that word, it's called ineffable. You know
Hmm.
that? Do you know ineffable?
Sure.
So, there's sometimes that people get close to that space, but there kind of aren't words. There
Right.
aren't words to describe some of it. So some of it can be, well, even now it's hard to tell you about
I,
how to describe because there's no words.
the
But
Tao that,
but
yeah.
I can't tell you this. You can feel it. One of the ways I like looking at this whole thing, Brian, with this whole, the thing that connects us all.
Mm.
So if you take the concept of the Big Bang Theory, so that is, you know, poof, and everything goes out and expands, and then universes and all of that. And some people then can look at that from a religious perspective, and God said, let there be light, right? So, or God said the word, and then, same sort of thing, right? That.
Mm.
Well, there's a way, it's come through in many sessions, and I think some of this has to do with ascension and us waking up and all of that. So if you think about everything going out, 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 one way of thinking about what's happening right now, I think it's like a firework, right?
Mhm.
That's going backwards.
Mm.
So if you think about infinity or timelessness or, life without end, well, then you think about the Big Bang or you think about the out breath, there's, the out breath, well, then there's the in breath. And if you get all the way back in, well, then you just go out again. So it's still infinity. But I think some of what may be happening, and I think some of this also has to do with where we are in the cosmic belt, like where the Earth is moving through.
Yes.
We've been in a very dark place where things have been, very hard and where it's very dense and where things have gone
Yep.
backwards for a while. And we're going through this place. And I think we're doing the in breath now, which I think is why it's easier to connect
Mhm.
to other aspects of ourselves and other people. You or some of your viewers might be aware of, and I've only just listened to, I'm in the second episode, but if you're aware of the phenomena of the thing out there called the telepathy tapes at all, have you heard
Yes.
about that?
Very good, interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So if you pay attention to what's going on there, we can learn a lot. And Even Dolores said, and we all talked about these autistic kids, you know, even before she passed. Um, there's something to be learned there, and there's some expansion going on there, and we're in this very messy place of leaving one kind of world behind and stepping into this new world that we nobody really knows. I don't think if you're human, really, do you really know what's coming? A lot of people can say, a lot of people can channel, a lot of people can talk about it, a lot of people can catch glimpses, but I think things are changing all the time. But if you pay attention to the telepathy tapes and these children who are considered nonverbal, but read minds at the drop of a hat, and more interestingly,
Yeah.
connect somewhere else with each other. They
Yep.
have community in another realm. Oh, and they
Hmm.
call it the hill. So if you watch these, they call it so there's like these groups and groups of autistic kids who go to a place simply in their mind, and they have experiences uh singly and or with others in a bigger group or a smaller group, or I'll meet you there. It's like they meet friends in this like dream space, in this space.
Yeah.
And with the telepathy tapes, they're asking these questions, and it's very hard to deny what's happening with these children and their care providers is not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. And traditionally society thought of them as sort of broken or, special needs or whatever, and we're
Yeah.
completely missing the point.
Yeah, we are.
They're wired differently than the bulk of humanity has been.
Yeah.
I think in order to channel a larger volume of information from a wider source, you got to be wired a little bit different. And these kids, I feel like, are many of them are being born kind of, with their Ethernet on already.
A couple sets of clients that move into that direction after events in their lives. One is some people who are in accidents, especially if they hit their heads.
Hmm.
Uh, this can start happening with them. And here's another one: if they get struck by lightning. I've had a number of clients who've been struck by lightning, and everything changes. So what does that tell you? You know, there this frequency, this electricity goes through their neurology, you know, through their neuron patterns and their connectivity and all of their stuff, and things start changing in the biggest way, right? So, you know, people call this stuff metaphysical, and they call it woo woo, and they say you can't measure it and stuff like that. I think it's just because we don't have the tools to understand it. I think it's all the same stuff. I think it's all physics. It's not
Yeah.
metaphysics. I think it's physics
Yes.
that we just don't understand yet. It's like humans can see this much of the light spectrum. Well, we know there are things this way, and we know there are things this way, and you believe in
Yeah.
x-rays, don't you?
There it is.
But you can't see one when you're in that room.
Hmm.
But you know, just because you can't see it and measure it, well, there's still proof that you that happens.
Hmm. And we have access to it, and
Exactly.
that's one of the things that I love about what you're doing and others is helping people to get the inner critic to set us, take a seat, you know, and just open up to the feeling, down
Yeah.
through alpha, down slower, mellower, mellower, mellower. And now there's just this bare attention. And then you realize the top of your head is connected to much more, metaphorically speaking.
True. That's absolutely true. You
It's
know, you say that though, but I may have to jump in and tell you that I actually, because of, and I know you know this, anybody who's alive knows this, humans' attention span has gotten like,
super short.
you know,
Mhm. Yep.
it's like
It's
down to
just,
here.
it's the environment that we live in, right?
Uh,
Quick.
in a lot of ways, and yet look at podcasts like this. Some people just love the really long ones, right? I mean, I think
Hmm.
that's interesting too. But um, because so many people don't trust this idea of trance or don't want to be hypnotized, or there's a lot of stigma with it. And frankly, because there's a lot of time commitment and on both the client and the practitioner's part, and sometimes, you know, mean, we all need to pay our bills, so our fee has to be higher depending on how long, we're spending, kind of a thing. And a lot of people have made this statement that I believe that is kind of untrue, which is the only way you can talk to your higher self is if you're in a trance state. And I just do not believe that's true at all. So
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, I created this um, other approach, but I like the term that you use, the inner critic. One of the reasons we use the trance state is because it tends to make that inner critic either a little less cantankerous, or with some people that actually takes a nap. It just goes away. And then there this part of this more adventuresome part or open part or imaginative part of you, your experience or your brain or your mind can have an experience that way. Some people's inner critic never goes away. That actually happens to be me, by the way. I can
Mhm.
have these experiences, but my inner critic is over here the whole time, basically laying on the floor and peeing her pants laughing, thinking the whole thing's ridiculous.
It's
I mean, look how
crazy.
long I've been doing this. I've been doing this coming up on 18 years or
Is it?
17 and a half years anyway. Yeah. And I still, when I participate in this, I have a ha inner critic over here or an
Mhm.
ego or whatever. There's a real reason for that. But if you can compartmentalize or have it stay over here, then you can have a reasonable session. Still, people may not have wanted to spend that much time. So I created this approach that still allows you to connect with that higher aspect of yourself.
Mhm.
And it still minimizes your inner critic or your analyzing part of your mind, but not by relaxation and
Mhm.
not by a reduction in your brain waves,
Mhm.
but by speed. I figured out if you
Oh,
just did it really, really fast, because what the problem is as you're doing it, you're trying to make it logical or fix it or
mhm.
make arguments about what's going on or whatever. But
Right.
if you can, again, so you're bypassing the same thing,
Hmm.
that inner critic, just in a different way. So I created this approach called Quantum Connect, and you can use it as a
Okay.
tool or a standalone thing. And we do Quantum Connect sessions, and sometimes they're as astounding and as amazing and revealing and as healing as some of these other sessions, and they're very quick.
Wow. It is just getting the ego mind out of the way. Yeah, one
Yeah,
thing for
and
another.
letting the person play, kind of play. If
Yep.
you can get the person to just play and not worry
Yep.
about
Yep.
how what they're saying comes
Yep.
across, if you can get somebody to let it out like that, then sometimes
Yeah, I think the
magic
labeling and
happens.
judgment, right? I mean, it's the need, the urge to make sense of it while it's happening is stopping it from happening. So just,
Yeah.
let it be, let it happen. You hang the pendulum, and you ask the pendulum which one is yes, which one is no, the circle or this. And you just observe in your unconscious mind. If you don't, get in the way, for most people, they can get access to what their higher mindset sees of this. And it
That's
works.
that's fascinating, and I know you know Pamela, so I'm gonna name drop her right now, because
Yeah.
Pamela and I have
Good.
talked about the pendulum thing, and I've always like, and it was one of my favorite moments with Pamela Ehrlin ever, because I know a lot of people use pendulums, and I don't, and but I've tried, and when I hold that pendulum like this, it always just hangs straight down. Nothing ever happens with it. And Pamela said
She
that's what
said
happens to me too.
she said the
And I'm,
same thing.
yeah, I know. And it was such a moment. It was like, I'm the exact same way. It just hangs there. Nothing moves on.
And that's fine too, right? Because you've got
Oh, it was
access in
just
a different
fun.
way, right?
Exactly.
There's tons
Exactly.
of different modalities, and I think if this
Exactly.
isn't working, push on the soft spot,
Exactly.
whatever actually
There you go.
is going
That's the way
for
to do
you.
it.
I do love though how with the modality that you've most dominantly been using, um, pretty much anybody, if they just give it a chance and they just surrender their doubt, they surrender the fear from all the programming that it's all, demonic, it's all, that kind of stuff, because there's so much fear around that stuff to create. control structures to funnel people into those church pews,
Yeah.
and kind of missing the point of direct access.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they can just surrender that stuff, I am repeatedly blown away for all. I mean, so many years I've been looking into this stuff, 30, 40 years. I've been looking into all these things pretty in depth. You just keep getting evidence, irrefutable physical evidence or knowings. There you go. There's just no other way to know that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's true. Have you studied at all the Mandela effect?
Some of it, yes. And with regards to that, I actually wanted to run this by you with regards to
Okay.
physical healing.
Yeah.
Right. Multiple realities, multiple dimensions. It gets complicated, in the nomenclature. But
Yeah.
if you consider what Bashar teaches about the healing of the body, he's just saying, no, 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 you didn't really fix that body, so to speak. You moved your consciousness, your awareness
Yep.
into a body that was already
Yep.
healed.
Exactly. I absolutely believe the same exact thing.
You do.
It's the same exact thing that happens. And it's a it's a very strange, yeah, the Mandela effect, and really understanding that and delving into all the different ways that it manifests. Because the way most people know it is by pop culture kind of things. It was this in the movie, no, it was that in the movie, no, Chick-fil-A was this, no, Chick-fil-A was that.
Mhm.
But if you really take it down to the core of, there really is no time other than now. It's just the now, right? So, and if
Mhm.
you can just remember that it's that the power is always in the now. But yes, and it's just turning that frequency, right? It's just turning that frequency. That woman
Mhm.
with the lungs, I mean, so the conversation I had
Mhm.
with her higher self was fascinating,
Mhm.
and might play into the answer here about physical healing
Mhm.
and different bodies. So I always ask in my quantum healing sessions about the root cause of anything. What's the root cause of cancer? What's the root cause of whatever? So I asked, even with this healer, what's the root cause of her scarred lungs? I mean, and the answer is not, well, she was born early, dummy. That's not the question. The question is, what was the root cause of her being born early and having scarred lungs, right? So that's the question. Why? What's the root cause of having that? And the higher self said, oh, we completely planned that because she's such a powerful healer. Now, remember, I think she was born in the 1940s, right? The latter part of 1940s, if my memory serves. If she would have come into her own as a healer in her 20s, which would have been in the 60s,
Mhm.
she would the community, the world wasn't ready for her.
Oh yeah.
She had to be honest. Everything took her longer because she couldn't breathe.
Mhm.
And the way they described it was speed breaks.
Yeah.
This was speed breaks. They did it on purpose because she was so powerful.
Mhm.
She was never going to be accepted. She had to do everything slower.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, but she's a healer now. Does she need these speed breaks anymore? She need this anymore. Is it beneficial for her anymore? And the answer was no,
Not anymore.
no
Yep.
more. So, well, can we heal that, right now? And that's, even in the session is when she took her first gulp of air. So if you want to think about it, in the way of the mysterious ways that the way the power of now works is somehow she
Mhm.
switched channels. That body right there exactly was it was in a different body. She switched the channel to a body whose lungs were completely developed. It's not like those shriveled lungs went like this and like
No.
got inflated over here. It was higher than that. It was different than that. And if
Mm.
you and Dolores used to say this, Dolores used to talk about, every decision you make, but really every breath you take. Bashar talks about this too. You are switching all the time.
Yep.
All the time. And she actually said, think about this. This was a dream I had with her. It was all about, it was I call it my version state dreams. She goes, think about being a person, let's say a person who has a medical issue. Let me show you how many different bodies this person has
Hmm.
just in one morning. When they wake up, the first opening up the eyes, they don't yet remember that they're in a compromised body. Their
Hmm.
body's the first instant of opening, it has a potential of changing into a different body. But then they wake up, the conscious mind comes in, plays the story of self and personality. Oh, yeah, I'm the person that has this challenging physical issue. And as soon as
Yeah.
they remember that, they dial right back into that,
Yeah.
right? Oh, yeah, I'm the person who has the doctor appointment today.
Mhm.
So they get up and they take a shower. And maybe while they're showering, they forget a little bit and they're singing a song. And they forget a little bit for a moment that they're going to the doctor. They're in a better body then. They're having fun. They're having, but as soon as the shower stops and they look at their watch and they see how long they have to go to the doctor, they go back to the more compromised body. And
Mhm.
maybe they get in the car, and they're on their way to the doctor and they're like, oh God, how's this appointment going to go? Then they're in the worst state of the body. But then maybe they turn on the radio and maybe they sing and they remember when they were 16 and they went to that dance and and they had that really great time. Well, then they're in a better body. I mean,
Yeah.
do you see how this goes? It just
Yeah.
you are switching through your whole day like that.
Right.
And you can't sometimes consciously go, well, now I'm going to switch into it's more emotions do have a part of it, but it's an energetic thing, and belief systems do have a part of it, but not always. I've had and seen incredible healings for people who couldn't quite believe what was happening. So you
Hmm.
can't attest it to belief systems. But what Dolores used to say is it's just an infinite number. You could not possibly understand how big reality really is.
Mhm.
I mean, one way of looking at it is if you imagine that there are all these infinite Earths, and the Earth we're in right now, there's this Earth. It's very physical. And there's an Earth right next to it where a grain of sand somewhere on a beach in a Japanese island is moved over an inch. There's a
Right.
whole nother Earth just for that grain of sand being over there.
Yeah.
I mean, it boggle. We can't comprehend that, right? It's incomprehensible for us. And again, back to tuning of the radio back to a very specific frequency.
What do you want? I guess really is a question. What do you want to experience? That's your point of
Yeah,
focus.
where your energy goes, that's
Yeah,
where it
yeah.
flows. Where your
Attention
focus
flow. Yep.
goes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's very, very true in my personal experience. I think most people can get that idea. If you get out of bed, I call the toe stub day, where you get up, you stub your toe, and basically the rest of your day is stubbing your toe metaphorically, unless you cultivate some ability to reset that vibe,
yeah,
whether it's
yeah.
meditation or, just one really good deep breath in a mantra or something. It just is, I am one with my highest self right now. Whatever, you make it up your own way. I've experienced that we can change direction of the flow of our consciousness in the same way that many, many times I've had a parachute malfunction. I got a cutaway. I dumped my reserve. It's a whole new thing now. And I could continue the vibe of parachute malfunction, or I can do a reset breath
Yeah,
and
let's
create
not do that.
and create a beautiful landing. I've
Well,
tried
good for
both.
you.
you know, and it works better if we're able to realize in every moment that we're capable of upgrading our reality into the one that we desire, from uplifting our vibe and, shaking it off. The past is the past,
Or you
it
could even think of this concept of quantum jumping, which is
yes.
stubbing the toe, and then there one guy's name's Burt Goldman, who he was really something about this. I don't know if you're familiar with him,
Not yet.
but I haven't heard anything from him lately, but he has quantum jumping is kind of what he talked about it. And so he says than even he says one way you can look at stubbing your toe like that is um jumping back 5 seconds into time and deciding to be on a timeline where you never stubbed your toe to begin with.
Right.
That's one way of looking at quantum jumping. And
Hmm.
it,
It's all in your
anyway,
perspective. Uh,
another way of looking at
the
it.
the other aspect, I think, also is this communal reality that is an agreed upon set of
Exactly.
circumstances, right?
Yeah,
So I believe
exactly.
in gravity, and we all seem to, and it accelerates at 9.81 meters per second squared,
Yeah.
whether you believe it or not. So
Yes.
clearly
And yes.
there's something going on there, and I'm also though curious at the level of mastery, which most people aren't, there yet, or at least maybe they can wonder in that direction. I wonder how much of that can be sort of bent, or if it's just, hey
Yeah.
man, you're on Earth. That's how it goes.
Yeah. I think about that all the time. I think about that all the time. Um, I don't have an answer for that. There's a lot of mysteries, but you're right. There's a lot of consensus reality that plays into it. It's a Venn diagram. Your reality and consensus reality. But I think that consensus,
Yep.
yeah, I think that in there is shifting and changing a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And I also think there's a little bit of the hundredth monkey thing, which is I think
Yep.
the more people wake up and sort of go, well, why not?
Mhm.
The smaller that little thing gets, and the more it maybe is malleable and able to change.
It's easier to believe now more than ever before that reality is not just Newtonian, that we are connected, in our
Yes.
consciousness more
Yeah.
than we ever realized.
Yeah.
And it's so I teach jumping out of airplanes, right? You know this, but I also teach it through a virtual reality system where people are in
Mm,
multiple places, in many cases,
yeah.
multiple countries, where the
Yeah.
rules of physics are similar, but we've transposed ourselves, our consciousness into this reality, and we're choosing to believe in it.
Yeah.
It's such a neat metaphor,
It
for what
is.
it is, and it's consciousness expanding in a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
and I see a lot more creativity and things like that in that environment, insights, and I feel like that's what we're doing as a species. We're kind of going back and forth, goggles on, goggles off, 5D, 3D, 5D, 3D.
Here's an example. I did another interview yesterday with a woman, a colleague of mine who does this work too. And she was facilitating a quantum healing session for somebody online
Hmm.
who's having a perfectly regular, as regular can be,
Mhm.
session. And the experience that I'm getting ready to tell you about didn't happen to her client, but to her.
Hmm.
She actually had an absolute Kundalini rising experience. Like
Hmm.
the energy came up from her pelvis, up her spine,
I'm
out her head,
familiar.
did so you know what this is.
I'm
Well,
familiar.
listen to this
Experientially.
because it gets even crazier than that. As we're talking about it, at the moment, I'm in a basement. I'm in a chair that's on a concrete floor. And while she's telling me about it, I feel the floor starting to vibrate and I feel
Hmm.
this energy coming up my spine. And as this is coming up my spine, and she's just still telling me about her experience, right? And I'm thinking in my head, because I'm interviewing her, do I bring this up? Do I bring this up that while she's talking about this, I am feeling this energy almost exactly the way she is?
Hmm.
Now, we're used to a little more of that happening in session,
Yeah.
not when we're talking like this. And
Right.
I go ahead and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna mention this. I'm gonna say, and so at the point I'm like, I have to tell you what's happening right here. And do you know her eyes got really wide because you know why? Because while she was telling this, it was happening again in her.
Hmm.
So the experience happened to her. She's talking about the experience. Echoes of it are bubbling up in her. She's in Scotland, for gosh
Yeah.
sakes. I'm in Kansas, and we're both having this energy manifest in us. So I guess, for me, some of the takeaway of that is that's why some of what you're doing here, Brian, is so beautiful and important because sharing some of these exciting possibilities
Yeah.
with others actually transmits some of this energy to
Yeah.
the people who are watching.
Right.
Some in small ways, but some in some very significant ways. And it's beautiful what you're doing. And I thought a lot about it as I was setting up the computer. I know skydiving. I can imagine, and I know people who've done it, and I can see why you would do it. And I mean, I have flying dreams, so I can imagine a little bit, right? And I think that's brilliant. And I think some of that thrill that I know you must have,
Mm.
some of that's what it feels like,
Mhm.
it's
Oh,
the same rising of thrilling energy within you when
exactly.
you have some of these experiences, and especially
Yeah.
when you connect with other people's hearts and you see beautiful things, discoveries or healings or other things happening for them.
That's
It's a thrilling thing.
that's the best part. Yeah. When you have somebody that is really bound up in afraid, something happened. They landed in the trees, they busted their ankle, something, and then to nurture them back up to a sense of power again, to recognize they always were in power. They had the ability to make the choice and do the actions that lead to safety.
Mhm,
And beyond safety, a creative expression of this experience, right? That's what I'm hoping
mhm,
for,
mhm.
where they're inventing new things, right?
Yeah.
That process is for me metaphorical. And once somebody gets that experience of rising up out of fear, out of the contraction and the worry in this deep 3D saturated experience, to go, I'm going to open my flower just a little bit, let a little light in, and start to expand up and out again. They can take that experience and apply it in other matters that are
Yeah.
physical or a career or relationship or anything else.
Mhm.
That's why I do that.
Absolutely.
Um, this has been great. I don't want to keep you all day, but I like the idea of, if those of you out there in the audience are curious about this stuff, and maybe even you want to look into connecting with a practitioner, how can people reach you?
Well, not just me, but they can reach practitioners all around the world if they go to quantumhealers.com. I have a community of healers, like I said, all over the world. There's a directory there. We also connect through a support forum and a learning platform. But there's so many more people doing this work than ever before. So we're more easy to find than you might imagine.
Yeah.
And let me drop a small hint for you about a project that I just this morning learned is absolutely coming out and coming out soon. But I've been involved with a documentary filmmaker out of France
Mm.
who is making, he had a session himself with a beautiful French practitioner. And there was an interview, and Dolores's daughter is in it. But Dolores's session, the one I had with her all those years ago, portions of it will be in this documentary.
Oh,
No, nobody's ever made anything like this, to my knowledge, about Dolores since she passed.
wow.
And I hope that that's so, follow me on the socials because believe you me, when it becomes available,
Yeah.
I think that little project will really be beautiful for people to watch because this
Right.
filmmaker is so talented the way he put together some of this footage, and Dolores's own voice is in it.
Oh, I love hearing her voice. She just has such a nice way, and you too, a nice way of
Aw.
without dumbing it down, presented it in a way that pretty much anybody can go, all right, this is actually,
She had the grandma effect.
yeah,
She had the
yeah,
grandma. If she would have been like a stuffy white older
yeah.
professor guy behind a
Hmm.
lectern, people might have just. But she she made sure she sat in an armchair and wore her grandma clothes, and
Hmm.
she had a grandma personality, and that was to her benefit and to a lot of other people's benefit too. It was
Very,
easier to swallow some of the stuff she said.
totally, yeah, very disarming. And I'm just the reporter. I'm right.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
she was
God.
beautiful.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So that's
Well,
great.
this
And
has been fun.
it
Thank you
has.
so much.
I'm curious, are you doing some writing as well?
Oh gosh, yes. In a number of ways. I have several things in actually I have a book right here. Um a couple of things. This is actually an anthology. Your readers might be interested in this. It's called, let's see, Awakening Stories.
Right.
And what's really interesting about it is it's an anthology, so it's all these authors, right? It's the
Mhm.
awakening of a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, edited by my friend Dr. Allison Brown. It's called Awakening Stories. You can find it on Amazon. Um, each person here wrote a chapter about how they kind of woke up to more of reality. And I think it's a really important book because people can see themselves maybe in some of these stories, and um and see how different we all, have come to understanding that life may be a little bit more than what we thought. And some of my favorite parts about it are, in the back here, there's this glossary, and I'm so excited about this part because in this glossary is BQH. What is beyond quantum healing? I'm so
You
excited
made the
about
book.
that.
Good.
Yeah, because there's a number of BQH practitioners here, a lot of people
Mhm.
who woke up having this session or became practitioners and are continuing helping others wake up. So Awakening
Oh,
Stories, definitely is one of them,
oh, that's
that
great.
that's available out there.
It's such powerful work. If just more people need to know about it, that's all it is, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, at some point there was people dying of dysentery, and somebody came up with a medicine and went, oh, you know, and suddenly there wasn't so much of that. To me, this is bigger than that.
Oh, much bigger. I've said it over and over and over again. As much as we've seen, as much as happened, I think we've only scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'll give you the tiniest hint of this, but I truly believe this. I have series of dreams, and I'm in one right now that's on pause. It's a long story. A lot of it has to do with my dad being upstairs.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
have had a series of dreams with Dolores in them that are more than just dreams. They're lucid dreams,
Hmm.
but they've brought me to a place where Dolores herself has invited me to be in a circle of other practitioners in the dream space where she's continuing to teach. And guess what she did in this last installment? I'm waiting for the next installment to start again. But in the last installment of these dream series that I've had, and sometimes I have them, and then nothing for months. And then I have them, have them. But in the last of the series so far, which I thoroughly know is going to continue, in from the side door came somebody, and Dolores said, I want you to do a regression on this man. And I know who it is that's walking in. It's my maternal grandfather who died before I was ever born.
Oh, interesting.
Who had a story then of also my maternal grandmother who died when my own mother was 4. I mean, there's this whole huge thing in there, and some of that, of course, is wrapped up in my own DNA.
Hmm.
Here we go
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
And there are gifts in there to find and discover,
Yeah.
not only for myself, but to continue this idea of different ways of looking at healing. I mean, whoever thought I could do a past life regression in the dream state with my teacher who's passed, with a man who's part of my family who's been dead for decades.
Wow.
And some of the things that we're learning from that. I mean, who thinks of these things?
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
there's
next
so much,
level.
all kinds of crazy stuff's going on here.
Love it. I love it. I love what you're doing. I
Time
love you.
travel,
And
all the things. Yep.
this is great. Yeah, yeah. I will. Hopefully, we'll get to talk again
Yes.
and evolve all this stuff, you know, and sort of shine a light on the uplifting weirdness of the universe.
Fantastic. Well, you're doing your part. So thank you so much for that, Brian. Love it.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. You too.